So instead of 10 pieces of backpacking gear that I no longer bring on trips, how about 10 pieces of gear that I bring practically every time? The number one has to be the Wright Sock. Now these are my go-to 3-season sock. They're awesome because they're a double layer sock, and what they do is they allow the friction not to be between your foot and the boot, thus causing blisters, but it allows it to be between the 2 layers of the sock. And they have just as good a warranty in my eyes as Darn Tough. I mean, these things, if you go ahead and get a hole in them for whatever reason, you can go ahead and send them back and they replace them. The lifetime warranty is awesome. And so these are the things that I feel are really underrated. I don't hear a whole lot of people using them, but I found they've been really fantastic for me. Number 2 has got to be this little plastic scoop, because if you come across a water source or something where you can't fill a typical Sawyer bag or an Evernew bag or any sort of water bladder, the scoop comes in super handy for those standing areas of water where you just need to scoop up just a little bit. And I actually should have made this one a little bigger. It doesn't add a whole lot of weight, I promise. But this thing is kind of perfect for those hard to reach water sources. Trekking poles. It's one of those things that a lot of people I think take for granted, and they may not bring it depending on the elevation gain of whatever trip they're on. But I find these things are handy even on flat ground because they have so many other uses. The big one for a lot of people is setting up their tents. If you think about the Zpacks duplex or any kind of non-freestanding tent, usually they will use a trekking pole. Tarp tent, for example, is another one. For me, porch mode in my hammock tarp is one thing that I really can't really live without. Just me personally, I like being able to kind of set up porch mode and be able to look out and see what I am kind of camping around, see who's approaching camp, those kind of things. But as well as just a typical up and down. It's nice to have. It saves, it kind of gives you more of a full body workout rather than just powering through with your legs. You kind of have your upper body working as well. And for me, the downhills are where these things are really key. And so I will not go hiking without trekking poles again. Subaru Josh was just making fun of me for carrying a sit pad. This thing is a Thermarest Z Seat, and it only weighs, I think, 2 ounces is what it is. And so some, people always make fun of me and say, hey, you should cut that down just a little bit since you're really an ultralight guy. But I don't find the need to kind of cut this down. I've used this thing for fanning fires, kind of getting them started from embers. I've used it for kneeling on, sitting on, areas that are kind of wet or snow, for example. You don't realize how much you miss it until you don't have it. And so things like hard shelter floors, sitting on a rock. And I know a lot of people have gone with the, Dutch makes a sit pad, AliExpress has really cheap sit pads, and those things are, to me, a little too thin. It kind of just defeats the purpose. Sure, it takes a little bit of the edge off, but I really like the Thermarest pad just because it's a lot more cushy, it's a lot more comfortable, and it just makes the experience better. I'm not going to carry a camp chair. I just don't do that. I know some people do carry about, let's say, a pound worth of a camp chair, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But for me, 2 ounces is worth it just for this foam pad. Another use that this has is if the foot box of my quilt gets a little too cool because of my, let's say, my foot's poking against the down, compressing that, then you just kind of slip this in the foot box of your quilt and you're good to go. It cuts out all of that, insulates me in the hammock. If I have a cold spot with my arm, for example, sliding off the pad, that's what I end up putting there. Very useful. Number 5, the Zpacks rain kilt. Not only is it a rain kilt, but I use it, and I have it in the large for this exact reason, but I actually use it as a ground sheet. A lot of times outside my hammock is I can reach down and have all my gear that I need to on the ground next to me. I can kind of have my pack on the ground sheet if I need to. If it starts to rain and be really, really dicey outside, I actually sometimes will kind of fold this ground sheet over my pack just to make sure that it doesn't get completely soaked. It helps protect it just a little bit. So that 2 uses makes it super handy for me. A lot of times actually, unless I'm getting really, really heavy rain, I actually don't use this as a kilt very much. It gets used more as a ground sheet just because of its versatility. It's nice to have. This is the Snow Peak Trek 700, and it's one of my pieces of gear that's gone with me on practically every trip that you've ever seen on this channel. Big thing for me, it has inside measurements as well as outside measurements, so you actually kind of see exactly how much water you're putting in. Granted, you have a little bit of parallax, you're not looking right through it, but super handy. I've put it directly on coals to heat up chili. I've used it on alcohol stoves. I've used it on regular canister stoves, and it's just been fantastic. I know some people actually will go a little bit smaller because this is probably more space than I need, but I just feel like it's just the right amount if I wanted to add more water or boil water for two separate rehydrations at the same time. I can do that depending on how much water is needed, as well as this fits, everything kind of nests perfectly in here. A 110 gram canister stove, you know, my lighter, my knife goes in there, as well as my pocket rocket too, if I'm taking a canister stove. Alcohol, even easier. I also bring a microfiber towel. This is not the one I usually bring. I usually bring a Sea to Summit kind of extra small one. This is actually a little bigger, but a microfiber towel of any kind for me has come in super handy. I know some people will say, well, you probably should carry a buff. It can perform the same roles. You can pre-filter water with it and use it as kind of a face mask or kind of a frost bib in colder conditions. But I like the microfiber towel because I don't really want to put something in my face that I've been using to kind of clean off tarps or wash dishes or scrub myself off in a stream. I kind of want something designated just for that stuff. Make sure you get one with a loop attachment of some kind, because what I end up doing is I just kind of clip this to my pack, or if I just kind of used it to scrub off and it's a nice day outside, I'll actually clip it to the suspension of my hammock or the suspension of my tarp and let it dry. And it dries really, really fast. Going back to rain gear, my outdoor research Helium II, just a fantastic piece of kit. This one is it's large and it's only 6.6 ounces, but it packs down so small and, you know, folds into its own pocket. And it's just perfect for me. It is very minimalist. So those of you guys who are used to kind of having more features like vents or zips or pockets, this is just a rain shell. That's all it is. It doesn't pretend to be anything more. It's really ridiculously light, but it's also super tough. You know, some people sometimes ask me if this is something that will rip on branches or I'm ever afraid of going through brush. And no, I actually am not. I find that this is way tougher than a lot of some of those other rain jackets you see in the market that are so light that they become fragile. I haven't had an issue or even a concern going through brush with this. If you're thinking about off trail, going to Hanson's Point, where, I mean, you have pine branches and closed areas where you're kind of walking through like this. I've had this on, scrape branches, non-issue. I'm not even concerned about a puncture at all. And if you need a little bit more venting, some people do, the Helium HD is another option that, you know, I would look at or consider. Number 9 has to be the Humangear Duo. And those of you guys who have seen my favorite backpacking gear video of 2017 already know what this is, but it's so simple, it's so easy. I try to spread the word about this whenever I can, just because it's a spoon, it's a fork, it's longer than a long-handled spoon that you probably have to get into those Mountain House or bags or those backpacker meal bags of any kind. And it is ridiculously cheap. It's very versatile, easy to clean, and I think more people should carry this. Humangear Duo. Number 10, you know I had to do it. A trowel is gonna come with me every time. Comes on every trip, no matter if I know that there is gonna be a privy or some sort of facility of some kind, I still bring it anyway. It's one of those things that's gonna be just a part of my kit I have just in case I need to take something off trail, and it's gonna come every time. So you know I wanna know, what are your things that you bring every time? Now don't go for the easy stuff. Don't go for, yeah, my pack comes with me every time. Go for something that you think is truly underrated. What are your underrated items of gear that you bring every time, no matter how heavy it is, no matter whether it's something that someone considers to be not functional? Let me know what it is down in the comments. I'm really curious to see what are kind of your non-negotiable pieces of gear that come on with you every time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Peace.